And let's take a look at a couple of these tree diagrams, see how we do it. So start with the first one. This is from last class. I wanted to make sure I had a video explaining it. So a university professor fails 20% of the students in the final. After the final, he polls the students and asks them how many of them studied for more than 3 hours for it. Of those who passed the final, 72% said that they studied for it. Of those who failed the final, 31% said they studied for it. Make a tree diagram for the problem, then answer the following questions. So we start off with the pass and fail rate. The reason is because the professor is doing an analysis. So he's saying for pass, he's saying fail. And what he's saying is that 80% passed, 20% failed. Because it says 20% failed, these two need to add up to 1. So that tells me that 80% passed. And then he asked the question about studying. So we have studying, we have no studying. We have studying, we have no studying. So now we're going to read the same thing. 72% said they studied of those who passed, which means 1 minus that, or 28% of the people who passed the test didn't study. We get down here, it says that 31% studied, 69% did not study. So again, that's from that 31%. And what we can figure out at the end of these is the probability that someone passed and studied. And that's going to be the probability that they passed times the probability that they studied given that they passed. So that's 0.8 times 0.72. And again, all this is going to be calculator exercises, and 0.8 times 0.72 is going to give me 0.576. So that says about 57.6% of the students studied and passed. This is the probability that someone passed and they didn't study. That's the probability that you passed, times the probability that you didn't study given that you passed. So that is 0.8 times 0.28. And 0.8 times 0.28 is going to give you 0.224. If you add these two numbers together, the 57.6 to 22.4, you're going to get the original 80%. That's just saying how the split is of the 80% who pass the test. And we're going to do the same thing for the failures. So fail and study. And we're going to do fail and didn't study. And basically what we're doing is we're going down the branches. So this one, I'm going to save that part of the formula and say it's 0.2 times 0.31, this times that. And when you do 0.2 times 0.31, you get 0.062. And then for this one, it's 0.2 times 0.69. And when we do 0.2 times 0.69, you get 0.138. These two numbers are going to add up to the 20%. All 4 of these numbers are going to add up to 100%. So now, what is the probability that a student studies? Well, the places where they study here, and they study here. So what I'm going to do with those two numbers is I'm going to add them together. So it's 0.576 plus 0.062. And when we do 0.576 plus 0.062, we get 63.8. So this one is 0.638. So the probability that someone studied was 0.638. The probability that they didn't study, we just do the complement rule. We can do 1 minus 0.638. And this is going to tell us that about 36% of the class, a little over 36% of the class didn't study. Now this one, the probability. So this one is the probability of studying. And this is the probability of not studying. Okay. Now the next question says, if a student studies, that he passes. So what this is saying, what is the probability that that student passes given that he studied? So it's basically asking what proportion of this 63% were the passes. So it's going to be 0.576 divided by 0.638, and 0.576 divided by 0.638 says there's about a 90% chance. So the probability that someone passed, given that they studied, is 0.9028. So a little bit about a 90% chance. If a student doesn't study, he fails. Okay, so in this one, if a student, or let's do this one, a student studies, he fails. So this is the complement to this. So the probability that someone fails, given that they studied, I'm going to do 1 minus 0.9028. And that's going to equal about 9%, so 0.0972. And the last piece says, what is the probability if he doesn't study, he fails? So the probability that he fails, given that he didn't study. So that's asking the proportion of the failures out of the didn't study. So that's 0.138 out of 0.224 plus 0.138. And if I do that, there's a 38% chance. So 0.3812. And this one is going to be the probability that he passes, given that he didn't study. 1 minus 0.3812. And that's going to tell me there's about a 0.6188. So in English, somebody studied, they had a 90% chance of passing. If someone didn't study, they still had a 62% chance of passing. So this test basically said that whether you studied or not, or actually, I realize there's a mistake here. He didn't study. We'll see there. Whether you studied or not, the pass rate, like if you didn't study, you had about a 62% chance of passing. If you studied, you had about a 90% chance of passing. It shows that studying paid dividends. So we'll go ahead and pause on this one, and then I'll do a second video that will explain the second question from last class.